On some real shit, I gotta keep it so 100. I ain't never like you, cuz. I ain't gonna lie, I ain't never like your bitch. I ain't never liked you, cuz. You know I ain't like you. In the street, like, we ain't gonna talk about that on here.
You watch that guy that just has zero fear and say, yeah, we can get him, he tough, we're gonna have a hard time chewing on him, but we're gonna get.
You ever hear something so wild, so oddly specific, that you pause the video, rewind it, and go, nah, there's no way he just said that? Yeah, that's exactly what's happening right now. Because according to multiple whispers, industry chatter, and some very interesting interviews floating around, 50 Cent might have just hinted, not confirmed, not officially stated, but heavily implied, that Pooh Shiesty is operating on a level most people in the industry don't even understand. And no, we're not talking about music. We're talking about energy, presence, the kind of reputation that doesn't need headlines to move rooms. Now let me ask you something. Why do certain people who've seen everything, survived everything, suddenly go quiet when one specific name comes up? Why does the tone shift? Why do the jokes stop? And more importantly, why does someone like 50 Cent, who built an entire career off not being afraid to speak, start choosing his words very, very carefully? Now, before we go any further, let's be clear, nothing here is being presented as fact. This is all based on public conversations, alleged insights, and interpretations that are currently circulating online. But sometimes, it's not about what's said directly. It's about what's suggested. And what's being suggested right now? Yeah, that's where things start to get a little uncomfortable. Now here's where things start to get complicated. Because on the surface, this looks like just another moment in hip-hop culture. Another interview. Another clip going viral. Another name trending for a few days before the internet moves on to the next thing. But if you've been paying attention, and I mean really paying attention, you'll notice something different this time. The tone feels off. The reactions feel heavier. And the way certain people are choosing their words? Yeah, that's not random. We're talking about 50 Cent. A man who built his reputation on saying exactly what he wants, when he wants, how he wants. No filter. No hesitation. No second guessing. This is the same guy who turned trolling into a business model. The same guy who laughs in the face of controversy, doubles down, and somehow comes out even louder. So when that guy starts speaking more carefully, people notice. And recently, across interviews, podcasts, and social media moments, there's been a pattern. Not loud, not obvious, but consistent enough that fans started connecting the dots. A name comes up. A pause happens. A response follows, but it's measured, controlled, almost strategic. Now again, nothing here is being confirmed as fact. This is all based on public clips, interpretations, and what viewers are picking up between the lines. But sometimes, what's not said tells you more than what is. And the name at the center of all this conversation? Pooh Shiesty. Now let's be clear before we go any further. Pooh Shiesty is an artist who built a strong presence in the industry through his music, his style, and his image. His rise wasn't accidental. It was fast, impactful, and very visible. But with that kind of rise, especially in hip-hop, comes attention. A lot of attention. Fans, critics, commentators, and of course, people in the industry who've seen it all before. And that's where things start to overlap. Because when someone like 50 Cent, who's been through the highs, the lows, the business, the streets, the spotlight, speaks on patterns, people listen differently. Not because he's always right, but because he's experienced enough to recognize things others might miss.
Shot how many times? 9 times.
Where were you shot?
Most of them in the legs, I got hit in my hand and I got hit in the face.
Pain-wise, how bad is it to get shot in the face?
Probably.
Is it a 10?
It's not really like as painful as having to visit the dentist repeatedly for root canal.
What is it still in your tongue?
Yeah, it's great for oral sex.
Did you ever find out who did it?
Yeah, I know who did it shortly after.
And they are now where?
The guy who actually shot me is dead.
And in multiple conversations, he's hinted, allegedly, based on how people are interpreting his words, that not every situation is as simple as it looks from the outside. That sometimes, what you see in music, is just one layer. Now here's where it gets interesting. There's a certain way industry veterans talk when they're discussing talent. They'll mention work ethic, consistency, branding, numbers. But then there's another way they talk when something feels unpredictable. And if you go back and watch closely, you'll notice that shift. Not dramatic. Not obvious. But subtle changes in tone. Small pauses. Carefully chosen words. Almost like someone is thinking 2 steps ahead before finishing a sentence. Now you might be wondering, are we reading too much into this? Maybe. The internet does that sometimes. It takes a moment, zooms in, slows it down, analyzes every blink and every breath. But here's the thing. When multiple moments start to feel similar, that's when people start asking questions. And one question keeps popping up over and over again. Why does it feel like certain conversations carry more weight than others? Now again, we're not making accusations. We're not stating anything as fact. Everything here falls under interpretation, public discussion, and media analysis. But the perception alone? That's powerful. Because perception is what drives narratives. And narratives are what shape the industry. Let's not forget, hip-hop has always been about storytelling, about image, about presence. Sometimes, the story is in the music. And sometimes, the story is everything around it. The interviews, the reactions, the silence. And right now, it feels like all three are lining up in a way that has people paying very close attention. Even casual fans, people who usually scroll past interviews, are stopping and watching clips twice. Why? Because something feels lead. Like there's more going on beneath the surface than what's being openly discussed. And when that feeling starts spreading, that's when things go viral. Not because of confirmed facts, but because of curiosity. Because people want to understand what they're not being told directly. And whether that curiosity is justified or not, that's a different conversation. But one thing is clear. The attention is real. And it's growing. Now, add social media into the mix, and everything amplifies. A single clip becomes 10 posts. 10 posts become 100 opinions. And suddenly, everyone has a theory. Some people think it's just normal industry talk being overanalyzed. Others believe there's deeper meaning behind certain statements. And then there are those who sit right in the middle, watching, listening, and waiting for something more concrete. But here's the twist. Sometimes, there is no big reveal. Sometimes, the entire story exists in the tension itself. In the way people react. In the way conversations unfold. And in the way certain names carry a different kind of weight when they're mentioned. So the real question isn't what happened. The real question is, why does it feel like something might have happened? And why are people so locked in, trying to figure it out? Because whether it's perception, coincidence, or something deeper, the conversation has already started. And once a conversation like this starts in the internet age, it doesn't slow down. It builds. And what comes next? Well, that's where things start to get even more interesting. And what comes next is where the internet does what it does best. It doesn't just watch. It investigates. Now, not official investigation in the legal sense, nothing like that. We're talking about the digital detective energy that kicks in the moment something feels even slightly off. Clips get replayed. Comments get dissected. Old interviews? Oh, those get pulled out like archived files in a crime documentary. And suddenly, what looked like a simple conversation turns into a full-blown timeline. People start connecting dots that may, or may not, even be related. But that doesn't stop the theories. Because once curiosity hits a certain level, the internet doesn't ask for permission. It builds its own narrative. Now here's where things get especially interesting. Across forums, comment sections, and reaction videos, a few recurring ideas start popping up. Not confirmed. Not verified. Just repeated enough to gain attention. Some viewers claim that certain interviews feel too calculated. Others say there's a noticeable shift in how specific names are addressed, less joking, more precision. And then there are those who believe, again, purely speculative, that there's a deeper layer of industry awareness that the public doesn't fully see. Now, let's pause right there for a second. Because it's important to stay grounded. None of this is evidence of anything concrete. This is public interpretation, fueled by patterns people think they're noticing. But even speculation, when repeated enough, starts to shape perception. And perception? That's where things start to move. Now let's talk about something else that added fuel to this entire situation. Alleged behind-the-scenes conversations. according to various online discussions and unnamed sources floating around social media. So take this with a huge grain of salt. There have been quiet conversations happening off camera. Nothing official. Nothing documented. Just the kind of industry talk people say happens when the cameras are off and the microphones are muted. You know the type. Low voices. Careful wording. No recordings. Again, this is all alleged and unverified chatter. But the idea alone? It's enough to get people talking. Because the entertainment industry has always had this aura of there's more than what you see. And when fans feel like they're getting even a tiny glimpse behind that curtain, they lean in. Hard. Now add another layer to this. Social media behavior. Because in today's world, it's not just about what people say, it's about what they post. And sometimes, what they don't post. Fans have pointed out, again, observational, not factual, that certain posts appear and disappear quickly. Captions that feel loaded, but vague. Images that spark conversation, but don't explain themselves. Is it strategy? Is it coincidence? Is it just normal social media behavior being overanalyzed? Honestly, it could be any of those. But when you combine that with everything else, the interviews, the tone shifts, the online chatter, it creates a perfect storm of speculation. And the internet loves a storm. Now let's talk reactions. Because this is where things really take off. You've got one group of people saying, "Y'all are reading way too much into this. It's not that deep." Then you've got another group going, "No, there's definitely something there. You can feel it." And then there's a third group, the quiet observers. The ones who don't comment much, but they're watching everything. Every clip. Every post. Every reaction. Because they're waiting for that one moment. That one piece of information that either confirms everything, or shuts it all down completely. But until that moment comes, the speculation keeps growing. Now here's where the script flips a little. Because while all this is happening online, there's another conversation happening at the same time. A bigger one. About the industry itself. You see, situations like this, real or perceived, tend to spark wider discussions. About how artists are presented. About how narratives are built. About how quickly someone can go from rising star to center of controversy, based purely on perception. And suddenly, the focus isn't just on one person anymore. It's on the system. The environment. The way stories are told and retold until they become something bigger than their original form. Now, let's bring it back to 50 Cent for a second. Because one thing people keep pointing out is this. He understands narratives better than most. He's been in them. He's shaped them. And yes, he's definitely benefited from them. So when he speaks, even casually, people don't just hear words. They look for meaning. They analyze intent. They try to read between lines that may not even exist. And that's what makes this entire situation so fascinating. Not because of what's been proven, but because of how people are reacting to what might be implied. Now let's talk about the anonymous source effect. You've probably seen it before. A post pops up, according to someone close to the situation. No name. No confirmation. Just a statement. And somehow, that statement spreads like wildfire. Now, to be clear, this kind of information should always be taken with extreme skepticism. But in the world of viral content, it adds intrigue. It adds mystery. And most importantly, it keeps people watching. Because now it's not just about what's public. It's about what could be happening behind the scenes. Even if there's no solid proof. And that's the tricky part. Because the line between curiosity and assumption, it gets blurry fast. Now throw in reaction channels, commentary pages, short-form clips, and algorithm-driven recommendations. And suddenly, this isn't just a conversation. It's a full-blown media cycle. Every take feeds another take. Every reaction creates another reaction. And before you know it, the narrative has a life of its own, completely independent of the original source. Now here's the big question. Is any of this actually pointing to something real? Or is this just a perfect example of how powerful perception can be in the digital age? Because sometimes, the story isn't the event. It's the reaction to the event. And right now, the reaction is loud. It's layered. And it's not slowing down anytime soon. Which brings us to the next phase. Because when speculation reaches this level, When conversations start crossing from entertainment into something that feels more serious. That's when people start asking, what happens if this goes further? Not saying it will. Not predicting anything. But just asking the question, what if? And that question alone, yeah, that's where things start to get even more intense. And that question alone, what if? That's the moment where everything shifts. Because up until now, this has mostly lived in the world of conversation. Clips, reactions, theories, speculation. The kind of content that trends for a few days and then fades into the endless scroll. But when people start asking what happens next, that's different. That's when the conversation starts to feel heavier. Not confirmed. Not official. But heavier. Because now you're no longer just watching something unfold. You're anticipating where it could go. And in today's digital landscape, anticipation is everything. Now let's be clear again. There are no verified reports of any major legal action, no confirmed investigations, no official statements tying any of this speculation to real-world consequences. But that hasn't stopped the internet from doing what it does best. Projecting possibilities. Some discussions online have started exploring hypothetical scenarios, purely speculative, about what would happen if situations like this escalated. Would there be more interviews? More statements? Would people start addressing things more directly? Or would everything stay exactly how it is, subtle, controlled, and open to interpretation? Because sometimes silence, that speaks louder than anything else. Now here's where things get even more interesting. In situations like this, perception can start to affect reality in small ways. Not legally, not officially, but socially, brand-wise, public image-wise. Because once a narrative, even a speculative one, starts circulating, it can influence how audiences view everything that follows. A new interview, it gets analyzed differently. A social media post, suddenly it's a message. Even something completely unrelated can get pulled into the conversation. And that's not because anything specific was proven. It's because the context changed. Now let's talk about industry pressure. Again, nothing confirmed here. But historically speaking, when conversations around artists start gaining this kind of momentum, there's often a shift behind the scenes. More caution. More awareness. More attention to how things are presented publicly. Not because of guilt or wrongdoing, but because of optics. Because in an era where clips can go viral in seconds, one misunderstood moment can turn into a week-long headline. And nobody, artist, label, brand, wants to be caught off guard by that. So what do? They adapt. They move carefully. They control the narrative as much as possible. Or at least, they try to. Now here's the twist. The more controlled something feels, the more the internet tries to break it down. Because people are naturally curious. If something feels too polished, too measured, too intentional, they start looking for what's underneath. And that brings us right back to where this all started. Those subtle shifts. Those careful words. Those moments that made people pause and say, wait, what was that? Now, let's zoom out for a second. Because beyond all the names, all the clips, all the speculation, there's a bigger pattern here. This isn't the first time the internet has taken a moment and turned it into a full narrative. And it won't be the last. We've seen it happen before. A comment becomes a headline. A headline becomes a theory. A theory becomes a full-blown storyline that takes on a life of its own. Sometimes it leads to real developments. And sometimes, it just fades away once the next big topic shows up. So where does this one go? That's the question nobody can answer right now. Because it depends on what happens next. Will there be more interviews? More comments? More moments that add fuel to the speculation? Or will everything go quiet? Leaving the internet to slowly move on? Now let's bring it back to 50 Cent one more time. Because regardless of where you stand on all this, one thing is undeniable. He understands attention. He understands timing. And he definitely understands how to stay part of the conversation without saying too much. So when people say things like, why is he being so careful? Or, why does it feel like he knows more than he's saying? That might not be about hidden information at all. It might just be strategy. Or it might be nothing. That's the part that keeps people guessing. And that's exactly why this conversation hasn't died down. Now, let's talk consequences. Not in terms of confirmed events, but in terms of impact. Because even without anything official happening, conversations like this can still have effects. They shape narratives. They influence public opinion. They create moments that stick in people's minds. And in the entertainment world, perception can sometimes be just as powerful as reality. Now imagine this scenario. Again, purely hypothetical. A situation where speculation continues to grow. More people get involved in the conversation. More interpretations, more theories, more breakdowns. At what point does it stop being just talk and start becoming something bigger? Or does it ever reach that point at all? Because sometimes, the story is never resolved. It just evolves, until people stop paying attention. But right now, people are definitely paying attention. And that brings us to the most important part of all this. You, the audience. Because at the end of the day, this entire cycle, this entire narrative, exists because people are watching, reacting, and engaging. Every view, every comment, every share, it all adds fuel. So now the question shifts from what's happening to something even more interesting. What do you think is happening? Is this just another case of the internet overanalyzing normal conversations? Or do you think there's something deeper behind the tone shifts, the pauses, the careful wording? Is this strategy, coincidence, or just the way modern media works now? Because one thing's for sure. In today's world, the line between reality and perception isn't always clear. And sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones that are never fully confirmed. So here's where we leave it. No definitive answers. No official confirmations. Just a series of moments, conversations, and reactions that have somehow turned into one of the most talked about topics right now. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the mystery is the story. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think people are reading too much into this? Or do you feel like there's something more beneath the surface that hasn't been said out loud yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's have a real conversation about it. And if you made it this far, you already know, this is the kind of content where things can change fast. So make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because if anything new comes up, any new clips, any new angles, any new weight, did you catch that? Moments. We're breaking it down right here. Stay tuned. Because this story, yeah, it might just be getting started.